Welcome to the Functional and Integrative Medicine Podcast. This podcast is all about exploring root cause medicine, showcasing the power of this approach, and inspiring other medical providers to follow this incredible path. I'm your host, Ginger Allen, and founder of Your Medical Liaison, a medical marketing agency working with medical providers since 2012. My passion for root cause medicine and provider advocacy drives me to help medical providers who have incorporated functional and integrative medicine into their practices. So let's dive in. We're thrilled to welcome Dr. Deb Matthew to the podcast, a physician, educator, speaker, and best-selling author who's widely known as the Happy Hormones Doctor. She's also a wife and mom to 4 boys, and her mission is clear: to help people love the way they feel by getting to the root cause of their symptoms, especially when hormones are at play. After struggling with exhaustion and irritability that left her feeling like a shadow of a mom and wife she wanted to be, Dr. Deb discovered her own hormone imbalances, and everything changed. That personal transformation launched her into the world of functional medicine, where she's now dedicated to helping others reclaim their health, energy, and joy. She's made over 100 TV appearances, authored 2 best-selling books, and is featured in The Evolution of Medicine. Through media, mentorship, and global speaking engagement, Dr. Deb empowers both patients and providers with science-based solutions for lasting wellness. Let's welcome Dr. Deb to the show. Hi, Doc.
Hey, so good to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your clinic to be with us today. And you might be the most well-known doctor I've had on the show. So this is super exciting for me. So thank you so much for being willing to be on the show.
Yeah, I love to talk about this stuff.
Oh, good. All right. So if you could just share a little bit about your professional journey and what led you into functional and integrative medicine.
Yeah, well, if you can believe this, I originally started out as a pediatrician, and I was a pediatrician for about 10 years. But in my own personal life, I was exhausted all the time. Like napping was my favorite hobby, and I was freezing cold all the time. Even though I lived in North Carolina, I would take a sweater with me everywhere, even in the summer, because air-conditioned restaurants and movie theaters, I would just shiver uncontrollably. And I didn't really understand why I felt this way, but it had been going on for so long that I just thought that I was a cold-natured person who needed more sleep than everybody else. And I just sort of accepted not feeling that good until I got into my late 30s and things got way worse. I was anxious over the craziest little things. And like a few days later, I'd look back and think, what on earth was I even thinking? And I had no patience with my kids. I felt so guilty for shrieking at them like the Wicked Witch of the West. And my poor husband is the one that had to put up with it the most. And I'm so grateful that he's patient. But, he got to the point where he was like, why are you unhappy all of the time? Like, you're not really fun like you used to be. And it was affecting our marriage. And he actually found a book that he brought home to me and suggested that I read. And it was a book that was written by Suzanne Summers about women's hormones. And I mean, he's a brave guy, right, to suggest that hormones that were off.
But especially to a physician, like, who did he think he was?
We don't want to get our medical information from celebrities, right? Like I just knew Chrissy Snow from Three's Company, right? She was the ditzy blonde. And then there's the Thigh Master. Like this is not where I want to get my medical information. But nothing in my medical training helped me understand what was happening to me. And so I read the book, and that book changed my whole life, because when I read the stories about the women who felt just like me, and then how much better they felt when they got their hormones back in balance, it really allowed me to open my mind, and suddenly everything made so much sense. And there were links in the book for where I could go in order to really get proper medical training. And I realized like, it's not woo-woo medicine. There's real science behind this. It's just not what we're taught. So as a result, I was able to learn how to get my hormones back in balance, and I got my energy back. My kids got their mom back. My husband got his wife back. I got my life back. But I couldn't go back to just writing prescriptions all day long, because that just didn't make sense anymore. So I completely retired from the old me, retrained. And now for the last 18 years, I've been helping men and women get their hormones back in balance so that they can get well, get off a lot of those prescription drugs, and really love the way they feel.
I love that. When you said 18 years, I was like, wow. So you started this back when some of my other clinicians, very few of them were starting this, and really an outlier, going against the grain, and probably being shunned by a lot of your peers at that time. Like, what are you doing?
I know, they thought I was crazy.
Of course.
And One of the I had two really big challenges. The first really big challenge is I was practicing medicine in a different way, and none of my peers understood anything about what I was doing. Bioidentical hormones weren't really known back then. Menopause was very much like hormone replacement therapy was a terrible thing, at the time is how people thought about it. So that was one challenge, was this: nobody had heard of functional medicine or root cause medicine or any of that. Or even using nutritional supplements was like, we were taught in medical school, like that's just expensive urine and there's no science behind it. But the other really big problem that I had is that what I was doing didn't really fit within the insurance model, because I couldn't spend 10 minutes with people and figure out the root cause of their problem. So I had a cash practice. And back in 2007, when I opened my cash practice, I had like these big dreams and hopes, and I was going to help people. And by 2008, I owed the bank $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
We'll never forget the day my husband and I are like sitting across the kitchen table. It's about 9 o'clock at night in January. The kids are in bed and we're just staring at each other. I got my laptop open and a stack of paper, stack of bills beside it. And we're just sitting there in silence because we don't even know what to say. Like, we don't know if we're going to have to declare bankruptcy or if we're going to lose our house or,
Oh my gosh.
But what I really knew is that I loved what I was doing. My patients were getting better. It just felt like the right way to practice medicine and the right thing to do. And so we made the decision to just keep going. And he took extra jobs on the side and I took extra jobs on the side. So
Oh
we
my
literally took
gosh.
extra jobs in order to pay for me to be able to practice medicine this way. And it took
Ah,
7 years for me to pay off the debt. So for 7 years, I didn't even pay myself. And
wow.
on the
That's how
one
it goes to show how passionate and dedicated you were to this type of medicine. Wow. That's
and
amazing. That's a very inspirational story. And for all you clinicians out there listening to this story, that are going through tough times, and I'm working with some of you, and we know how hard it is. But I think the message Dr. Deb is saying, push through it. You'll
yeah.
get through it. It will take time, but just keep going.
Hopefully not 7 years. Can we fast forward to the end of the story? Because let's
Sure,
get
give us the end of the story, and then we'll go back to
yeah,
it because this is so
yeah,
fun. We can go to the regular questions later. Go ahead.
yeah. So the end of the story is, now I have this fabulous practice. There's 6 other practitioners, like 5 other practitioners plus me. We have 4 health coaches. The practice is very stable, growing. I see patients as much or as little as I want. So currently what I choose to do is see patients 6 days a month. The other time I'm either on vacation or I'm training other practitioners, both in how to run their business and also how to prescribe bioidentical hormones. But so now everything is awesome. And there's
Yay.
so much that I've learned along the way. And so really now my passion is to give back to other practitioners, because I don't want anybody else to have to go for 7 years without being paid. And, it's lonely. It's hard.
It is. I love that. I love that. So the moral of the story is that you will be successful,
Yes,
and
don't
I
give
mean,
up.
wow, look at you now. Don't give up. All right. So let's talk about, I like to also kind of educate. Part of this podcast is about education. So one of the questions I have is, what are some of the most common root causes you see in your patient population, and how do you address them?
Yeah.
I mean, we know you've touched on hormones. So.
Yeah. Well, so I guess for me, because my sort of identity is around hormones, I
Mhm.
would say that one of the big things that I do see is women going through perimenopause and menopause, and they have a lot of symptoms like anxiety and depression, or just like lack of motivation. They just sort of feel blah. Maybe they're not sobbing and hopeless in the corner, but they've just lost their zest for life, or, their spark. Probably their libido too. And what happens is they go into their, primary care doctor, their gynecologist, and they try to put this into words. Like, I just don't feel like myself. Something's just not right. And then what tools are we given? We give them antidepressants and anxiety pills and sleeping pills, but so often it's hormones. And if the symptoms that they're complaining about are hot flashes or heavy periods or PMS, then there's a clue that it's hormonally related. But so many of the symptoms that come with hormone changes, or they're not obvious. Lying awake at 3 o'clock in the morning doesn't mean that it's an ambien deficiency, but it could be a progesterone deficiency. So just being aware
Mm.
that hormones have very, very far reaching implications, I think, is one really important root cause that practitioners really need to know about and to be thinking about. The other thing that I would say, which is probably maybe the other really most important root cause thing that we look for, what's going on in somebody's gut. Because we see people eating maybe even really healthy foods, but they have hidden food sensitivity. So it's not the right foods for them. And it just creates inflammation in their gut. And the inflammation doesn't stay in their gut, goes through their bloodstream and goes to their brain. And then they've got anxiety, depression, irritability, mood swings, bad focus, hormone imbalances, weight gain, all the things. And so I would say the flip is true, that sometimes women don't feel good and maybe they're 45 or 50 and they think, I think it's my hormones. And they go to some kind of a hormone clinic and they get put on some kind of bioidentical hormones. But if we're not also looking at the rest of it, then they don't get all the way there. If you're still eating a very inflammatory diet, or, if your gut microbiome is completely messed up, if you're just not healthy on the inside, the hormones can only go so far. So those are two things that I think are really important. And then
Thank
maybe if
you.
I can just slide one more in, it would
Sure.
be the effects of stress. Because stress is such a huge cause of hormone imbalances in women of any age. It's a huge cause of, cortisol regulates our immune system. So when we're stressed and cortisol is out of whack, now our immune system misbehaves. That allows us to develop things like food sensitivities and gut microbiome imbalances and all the rest of it. So,
I was just going to ask you about cortisol because I got my labs done yesterday and it was 10:20 a.m. and they're like, oh, we can't do the cortisol lab because it's after 10 a.m. And I'm like, darn it. I'm like, do I really need that one? Do I need to go back? So I guess the answer is yes, I need to go back and get that cortisol lab.
Yeah. And the reason they said it's too late is because cortisol has a circadian rhythm. So it goes up in the wee hours of the morning. Cortisol is like long-acting adrenaline. So it's kind of like you get this little tiny adrenaline rush first thing in the morning. That's what makes you wake up and your eyes pop open. And then it's supposed to go down over the course of the day so that it's nice and low at night. You can fall asleep and sleep through the night. But often what happens is that pattern gets mixed up and backwards. Like, it doesn't go up in the morning. So now it's really hard to get out of bed and you got to press snooze like 3 times. And then you got to crawl over to the coffee pot because caffeine gives us a little boost of cortisol. So our brain can wake up and we can function like a human being. But so fine, you get out of bed, you get moving, but then a lot of people are tired in the day. Like they get that crash and burn, 2, 3 in the afternoon. They need another cup of coffee or sugar or a nap or something. But then in the evening, when cortisol is supposed to be nice and low, instead cortisol goes too high. And now they get the second wind. So now all of a sudden, like 10 o'clock at night, their brain is alert. They're getting their best work of the day done, but they can't fall asleep. And then the darn alarm goes off way too early. So depending on what time of the day you get your cortisol tested, you're going to get a completely different number. And so the best way, honestly, to look at it is to look at it on multiple times in a given day so that we can see what your curve looks like. And we can't really do that in a blood test because you're not really going to go back to the lab, 5 times in a day, but we can do it with urine. We can do it with saliva, just things that you collect yourself at home.
Oh, very good. And that kind of leads into the next question, which is what are the labs and diagnostic tools that you find most essential to uncovering imbalances? You touched on one.
Yeah. Well, so I really like to do cortisol testing. We do it pretty much all of our patients. And so either we do it in saliva or urine testing over the day. We generally look at a hormone panel for most patients, men and women. A lot of times we just start with blood work. We can also measure hormones in saliva testing and urine testing, and they're not measuring the same thing. So sometimes there are circumstances where I would pick one test over another, depending on what I'm really looking for. So for example, a blood test tells us what your blood level is, but that doesn't necessarily tell us how well the hormones are working in your system. A urine test tells us how much hormone you've peed out. So it's not the same thing as how much is in your bloodstream, but we can look at metabolites. So we can look at how your body is breaking down the hormones. And this might be something that I would really like to look for example, if somebody has problems with androgen related symptoms. So this would be symptoms from too much testosterone, like acne, sort of male pattern baldness, or hair growing in the places where they don't want it. We can look at how the body is processing the testosterone and related hormones. And another example would be women who have estrogen related problems, like a lot of like fibrocystic breasts or uterine fibroids or a family history of breast cancer. If we look at how the body processes estrogen, we can see there's one pathway that your body can break down estrogen that's actually breast protective. And then there are other pathways that under the wrong circumstances actually could promote breast cancer. Part of which pathway your body uses depends on your genetics, but part of it depends on the environment. So the foods that you're eating and the toxins that you're exposed to and the stress that you're under. So if we can see how your body processes the estrogen, then we can do things in order to help combat that or address that. And then we can redo the test to see if what we're doing is working.
That's awesome. And then you touched on the gut. What tests are you running for the gut?
Yeah. So typically we do a stool test. At the moment, the company that we're using is GI Map. We've used other companies in the past. We kind of go back and forth over time. But what we're looking at in the stool test is we're looking at gut microbiome markers, both the beneficial, good, healthy gut probiotic bacteria, and we're looking at the opportunistic bacteria, which are the ones that could potentially cause infections or problems under the wrong circumstances. We're looking at how well the body is digesting fats, how well digesting things like protein and carbs. We're looking for inflammation in the gut. We're looking at IgA levels, which is a marker for how well the immune system is working in the gut. We can look for markers of gluten sensitivity. So we're looking at not just the microbiome, but also getting ideas about how the gut is actually functioning. And then another thing that we do that is related to the gut is we do food sensitivity testing. We sort of combine the food sensitivity test along with doing an elimination diet where we ask people to skip the most inflammatory foods, which is corn, soy, eggs, gluten, and dairy and sugar. The food sensitivity
All our favorite things. That's
yeah,
all.
I know. The food sensitivity test is not perfect, and the elimination diet is, really we need to do that too, because not everything is going to show up on the test, and everything that shows up on the test isn't necessarily problematic. So some people just do the elimination diet and they don't bother with the test. Some people do the test and only eliminate the foods that show on the test. And so we combine the both to try to get the best of both worlds.
Oh, that's really good. All right. Well, in 18 years, I'm sure you've got thousands and thousands of patients whose lives you've improved significantly. But is there a story that sticks out in your mind that you can share with other providers that are listening to the show today?
Yeah. So one of my favorite patients came to see me probably like near the very beginning, so almost 18 years ago. And when she came in, she was basically disabled. She wasn't able to work. She had lupus. She'd been on, systemic prednisone for many, many years. She was in so much pain. She was so exhausted. She just had such poor quality of life that how she describes it is that she was surviving, but she wasn't really living. And she'd had to, give up her job. And she came to me as a last ditch attempt because all of her rheumatologists or other doctors, they'd done everything that they could. And, this was as good as it was going to get. And she just felt like she just didn't want to have to go on like this. So she came in to see me, and we looked at all of those things, her gut health. We looked at her hormone levels and toxins, and we really worked on all, the inflammation markers, all the things that we found, nutritional deficiencies, et cetera. And by over a period of months and now over years, she is feeling so much better. Not only has she gone back to work, but she's now a leader in her field. She was a music teacher, and so she went on to teach other music teachers, and she's also a composer. And so this year she actually, she composes for children's choirs, and she actually is the gosh, I don't even know what to call it. Who's like, how there's a poet laureate. So she's kind of something like that for composers. And she was on stage at Carnegie Hall as the conductor for an orchestra for a song that she wrote. So she's like become a star from being this shell of a person who was barely surviving. So it feels so good because she's doing so much good in the world. And so like I had a little tiny part to play in that.
That's amazing. I love that story. All right. So now we're going to talk about some of the challenges. I know you did already kind of talk about the financial challenges, so we can skip over that. What are the strategies? Can you share some strategies that have helped you to build such a successful practice in this field, in a bit from a clinical or business perspective?
Yeah. So from a clinical perspective, one of the things that has helped me so much is to develop clinical systems. And what I mean by that is functional medicine can be extremely overwhelming. There's so much to learn. Every provider, like if you listen, learn from different places, everybody's got a little bit of a different way to do it. And so you're constantly trying to find the best way, but then every patient is unique. And so what works for this patient is different than what works for that patient. So whenever we have a patient in front of us, especially when we're new to functional medicine, our brains sort of start to explode from there's so many different possibilities. And it's the exact opposite actually from if you're in, I don't know, family practice or something, and somebody comes in and they've got all these chronic symptoms, we feel like we got nothing to offer. Whereas if somebody like that comes into a functional medicine practice, we've got so much that we can offer, we don't even know where to start. So starting with the basics just makes everybody's life so much easier, right? Help them with a healthy diet, get some movement, help them sleep, get some stress management techniques, help them with some basic hormone balancing, make sure they've got some just basic nutritional supplements. We don't have to get super fancy. Let's make sure they got enough vitamin D, they've got some omega-3, just some of the basics. And I find that about 80% of people get so much better when we just do the basics. And then for the last 20% that are maybe more complicated, so now, we'll have to, go down the rabbit trails and try to figure out exactly what's wrong with them. But don't get so caught up in the weeds. Like, let's start with the
I love
basics.
that.
That goes so far.
I love that. And I share that with my clinicians when I'm helping them, with business consulting and marketing. And I tell them, stop with the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah. Oh my
You've
gosh.
taken enough courses. You've done enough credentials. You've got this. And, and like you shared, and I also remind them, each patient is unique. And so the way you practice is going to be customized, number one, to your style, and number two, to the patients that you're treating. So don't worry about the way Dr. Deb does it or the way Dr. Billstrom does it or doctor, any doctor that you've gone through their training. That's great, but it's going to be your practice and it's going to be customized to you. So I love that you shared that and reinforced that. Thank you. And then let's talk about the business side of things. Because, from a marketing perspective, I'm like, you got to get yourself out there. You got to be doing these reels every day. You got to be doing this content. And, it's a little bit overwhelming. They're like, well, and I'm like, well, if you want to have a successful practice, these are the things you need to do. So can you give us, give us some guidance on, you've been really all over the map, on TV shows and stuff. So, but that's a little bit hard to visualize. Yeah. So if you could start with the basics, like what should these doctors be doing as the basics to get started to help launch their practice and get some business coming in the door?
So I absolutely believe that the best way to get business is to speak. And that can be speaking in videos and reels and, on social media, on your website, but patients need to see you and hear you so that they, and get to know you a little bit, like share a little bit of your journey, because when they hear you and hear that you are really, earnest and you care and you want to help, that is what they want to work with someone. They don't want to go to a clinic or a practice. They're looking
for a doctor.
Yeah, they're looking for the person who gets them. And then one of the things that I don't even remember which, marketing person I heard this from, but I think it's really true, is when they hear you describe their symptoms when they hear you describe their symptoms in their words, they believe that you can help them. Like, they believe that you understand them and you get them, and therefore they believe that you can help them, even though that's not even logical. But so instead of educating all the time about the I don't know, like in the beginning, I would talk about like T4 to T3 conversion and why that's so important. But now I would spend more time talking about thyroid symptoms and how it feels, and like how it's so exhausting, or you're cold all the time. You have to take a sweater even in the summer, but it doesn't have to be that way. They don't need to know the details about all the deep, functional medicine stuff that we geek out on, but they need to understand that you believe them, you get them, there's a solution, you've seen this before, there's hope, they don't have to feel this way. So I feel
Thank you for sharing that, because I also tell my clinicians sometimes when I hear them speak, you got to dumb it down a little. You got to make it layman friendly, because if you speak at such a high level clinically, people like me and other laymen of the world, your patients, i.e., are not going to get it.
Yeah.
So keep it simple, keep it, I like what you shared about, share your story, share, real life, things that how it affects you, and, not get so much into the clinical. That's great when you're talking with your peers, but
Yeah.
thank you. Anything else other than the speaking that you would recommend? I have recommended my physicians to write a book as well. Any other tips and tricks?
Yeah. I think another thing that has really helped me that was a really hard thing to learn is that you sort of need to promote yourself. And that's something that feels really icky for us. So, for example, if you have an opportunity to speak, let's say somebody has a local gym and you're speaking, they invited you to come and talk about, whatever, at the local gym, then you want to promote that, like take pictures of yourself speaking in front of an audience, put that, on your website and your social media, show that you're an expert and you're speaking in front of other people. Like take at any time that there is an opportunity to showcase yourself in an expert sort of a position, it builds authority and credibility, and people kind of look for that. And for us, it feels like it's bragging, like it's doctors generally do not do that. We just have our little headshot on our page, and that's kind of the end of it. But it's something that we sort of have to just bite the bullet and get over it and just do it because it matters to the patients. And we often see ourselves as lesser than what we really are. Like it was just a gym. There were only 6 people there. So we like see it as less, whereas our patients will probably see it as even a little bit more than it was. Wow, look at, they were speaking. They can't see that there were only, 6 people in the picture. They maybe imagine there were 30 more behind them. So that's something that I find is really, really hard for doctors, is this idea that we kind of sort of have to toot our own horn a little bit. And that's really uncomfortable for us.
Yes. And I find that too, after 13 years of working with physicians, and I know, if it was a layman listening to this, they'd be like, yeah, right. But I'm here to tell you, after working with hundreds of physicians over the last 13 years, they are very humble by nature. They do not like to brag. They do not like to boast. They do not like to put themselves out there. It's very difficult for them. I've had them tell me that they refuse to ask people for reviews because it's against their ethical standards. I mean, they really have a hard time with this stuff. But when you're in this new type of environment where you have to build a cash pay business and you're not getting fed by insurance companies, you got to think outside the box. You got to do things that you wouldn't normally do in a traditional practice to get that business in the door. So thank you for sharing that, because it's the same thing that I preach. I love it. All right. And then, I had, one of the questions was, what advice would you offer providers, being in their journey? But I think you covered that, which is do the basics, don't get too crazy, and just, you covered that. So that's great. And then what trends in functional and integrative medicine are you most excited about? I know there's a lot of new cool stuff coming up.
Wow. Well, I'm really excited that menopause and perimenopause are kind of having a moment and hormones are becoming a little bit more acceptable, because I think that that's really wonderful. So I'm excited. That's not new. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, but it's new to a lot of people. And I'm actually in Florida as we're recording this at an ACOG conference. So this is the gynecologists, and we've been very warmly welcomed here, because sometimes the gynecologists are very poo-poo the whole idea of functional medicine. So I see a little glimmer of hope.
I love that. I have one of my good friends I think she's the only functional gynecologist in Nevada. And she's an amazing person who kind of started in the hormone space, and then that led her to functional medicine. Now she's fully functional. She doesn't do, deliver babies anymore. She doesn't do surgeries anymore. She's just straight up functional. And she is so happy, and she loves what she does so much. And I'm glad you're targeting the GYNs, because they need other MDs to say, yes,
It's okay.
it does work. It does
Yeah.
work. I think that's the thing. They think they're not sure. They're still unsure. Does this really work? Is this just a bunch of, and when they meet somebody like you, Dr. Deb, it says, yes, it does. That brings credibility to the industry as a whole. So thank you for taking your time to go and meet with those men and women. If there's one thing that you would like people to take away about functional and integrative medicine, what would it be?
I just feel like this should just be called medicine. Like, everybody has the power to vastly improve their own health, right? Just by taking control of their own wellness, eating right. Like there's just so much that we can do. But in the regular medical world, we end up spending so much time with sick people who aren't doing that, aren't interested in it. And so it feels like it's really hard to talk to people about getting healthy and well. But when you find the people that are interested, they want to do this, it's so rewarding, it's so empowering. It just to me, this should just be medicine, because it just is common sense, finding the root cause instead of putting a band-aid over the symptom. So what I like to say all the time is that living well is the best medicine, and there's so much that we can do to give people the information that they need to take back control over their own health, keep themselves well, and keep themselves out of all of our doctors' offices as much as possible.
I love that. And then lastly, can you tell other clinicians, providers, physicians, the best way to reach you if they're still on the fence about this and they just have a couple questions, or if you have any training or courses or anything that you're offering, and just how people can reach you in general?
Sure. So I am involved in the BHRT Training Academy, which is an organization that trains prescribing practitioners how to prescribe bioidentical hormone therapy. And I also have a program called BHRT Practice Launch, which is a course on the business of medicine. So how to have a cash practice, how to put together programs and actually charge what you're worth, so that you can have a thriving practice where your patients are thriving, but you actually can still have quality of life, and you can still be home for dinner with your kids, and you're not charting until 11 o'clock at night, or living in the stress of not being able to make payroll and keep the lights on. And probably the best way to reach me is just to email me. And my email is Dr. Matthew, so DrMatthew, so 2 T's, no S, at signaturewellness.org.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. It was a very enlightening episode, and really nice to have somebody with so much notoriety on the show. So thank you again for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks.